Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Rubin. It's great to have you back. How are you feeling? Good to see you, good to see you, good to see you. Okay, well, let's start with our global brief. And we start with the news that Vice President Kamala Harris is leading former President Trump by 2 points in one of the first polls taken after President Biden's decision to step aside from his re-election bid. If we take a look at this graphic here, this Reuters IPSOS poll conducted on Monday and Tuesday showed Harris just ahead with 44% support to Trump's 42% among registered voters. Now, within the poll's margin of error, that is, of course, but the figures, hopefully we can pull those up, but the figures are an improvement for the Democrats from a similar poll taken before Biden's announcement. Now, if the election for the president were to be held today among registered voters, according to this poll, Harris is 44%, with Trump's 42%, and they would be locked in a race that at that point would be too close to call. So that's what we're seeing here. In addition to the news of this poll putting the vice president slightly ahead, you do also have the news that Vice President Harris continued on her journey to earn the Democratic presidential nomination. There we go. Those are our figures there. So you can see before Biden dropping out, his ratings were around 41% to that of Trump's being 43%, and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's around, well, exactly the same, 44%. And then after the announcement of Biden dropping out, if you go to our next slide, you'll be able to see what I was referring to earlier, which is that Kamala Harris is now enjoying such a slight 2% lead over Donald Trump in these opinion polls among registered voters. So it will be interesting to see whether or not that will be repeated at the polls come November. Still a long way to go, but not quite. On that same token, Vice President Harris continued on her journey to earn the Democratic presidential nomination, and that focused on her holding her first presidential rally in the battleground state of Wisconsin. Let's take a listen to her speech.
And it is my great honor to have Joe Biden's endorsement in this race. So, Wisconsin, I am told as of this morning that we have earned the support of enough delegates to secure the Democratic nomination. And I am so very honored, and I pledge to you I will spend the coming weeks continuing to unite our party so that we are ready to win in November. So, friends, we have 105 days until Election Day.
We'll definitely discuss all of the happenings that happened in Wisconsin. But meanwhile, the Republican Party are working to find out what their line of attack will be. In the interim, more Republicans have come out again to refer to Vice President Kamala Harris as a DEI hire, that is, of course, diversity, equality and inclusion, and says that she is at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to candidates. Now, former President Donald Trump will be meeting up with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this Friday. You'll remember that even though the two were quite close during the Trump presidency, the pair had a falling out back in 2020 when Netanyahu congratulated Joe Biden on winning the 2020 election. Donald Trump found that to be a sign of disloyalty, especially after the United States had done a great job with Israel's interests, especially moving the Israeli embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was a very controversial move. And so they had fallen out thereafter. The Israeli leader has reportedly asked for this meeting with Trump, which signals a desire to get back into his good graces. Netanyahu is also expected to meet with President Biden and also one-on-one with Harris before then on Thursday, or at least this week. Our last update in the Global Brief, before we come to you for discussion, my dear friends, is looking at Kim Cheetle, the head of the US Secret Service, who has now resigned over security failures following the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump on July 13th. They had been calling for her head, and she has now given it to them in a resignation letter to agency staff. She said that she made the decision to step down with a heavy heart and takes full responsibility for the security lapse. Cheetle has held several positions within the agency for 27 years and was appointed leader by Biden in 2022. President Biden himself has thanked Cheetle for her decades of service in a statement and will appoint a new director soon. Biden also noted that the independent review to get to the bottom of what happened on July 13th continues, and said that he looks forward to assessing its conclusions. My dear friends, that is our Global Brief. What do you have to say?
So a couple of things. I'm happy about the bump Kamala is having in the poll. There's a lot of momentum. She's on the mall. She's raising money like wildfire. Man, I think she's crazy raising money. She makes crazy money.
She does very well.
You know who I'm imitating doing that? She's crazy.
But why would they say that about her?
No,
you mean the crazy comment about her laugh? Is that
No,
what
you
mean?
know who I'm imitating now, Trump. I think she's raising crazy money.
She is.
Crazy money. But a couple of things about the poll.
Talk to me.
When I look at polls, I look at margin of error.
Okay.
That's not showing a clear lead. The margin of error is plus or minus 3.
Sure.
So it's a dead hit.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, so it's a dead hit. But also, another poll by IPSOS that I wanted to look at is my fear for this election, and that's why I keep saying I think Trump will nick it. If it's a three-way race, she has 42%, Donald has 38%, then RFK has got 8%. The independent bloc are always determinants of every election. If you split the votes in America, Democrats pass a piece of the pie, 40%, Republicans, 40%.
Right.
The last split will always be the 20% independent. How Kamala could galvanize that base will make the difference. Let them say anything they want to say about her. Oh, she's a DEI hire and all of that. I mean, it just shows that they're afraid.
Yep. Yes,
There's
they
a
are.
lot of fear in their camp. Yesterday, we called for the sack of the resignation of Cheetle. I'm happy she's taking the honorable way. She goofed, Femi. You were talking about how she came to
I was going to say we didn't. You did.
I did. I called it. I called it,
Yeah.
and I'm happy she did it. She goofed big time. The empiricals were stacked against her. At first, she complained that the roof was so slopey, nobody could stay on the roof. You couldn't put an agent up there. A 70-year-old man climbed the same roof yesterday to show that this woman is baloney. She's saying a lot of malarkey.
They did give her
So
help.
she gave her a lot of washing. But the problem I imagine now in the Secret Service is a lot of poor funding. If the new person comes in, they need to work on that.
Yeah.
Those are the things they need to work on. But she messed up. No, it's
All right.
unforgivable.
So my stance yesterday was like, it's rich coming from us in Nigeria that we can't even get accountability for many of our people asking for the resignation, especially since you went to...
Kudos to Akpabio for the apology.
Yes, kudos to him.
Akpabio.
Eventually, yesterday, he did come out to apologize. It was long-winded, though.
In terms of, I was speaking to the fact that she was able to show receipts in terms of her track record and what she had done, and she was trying to defend herself, even though it didn't quite work out. But she has a good track record, and she's worked her way up the ranks. So even though she's left on a low note, she still has that to back up. But let me talk about the fact that I think the Republicans are shaking. They are shaking because I don't know if they really saw Kamala Harris, because now they're bringing up a lot of things, and some might have merit, others might not. For instance, Trump's campaign team have come up to say that they're going to file a suit to prevent Kamala Harris from using Biden's campaign funds, saying that the money was raised by, so it goes against the rules set for how campaign funds are spent. But let's see how that would work out. But Harris's team have come out to say, well, if that were the case, then she wouldn't raise upwards up to $100 million since Biden mentioned that he wasn't going to be running. So that the decision had always been that from the beginning, they would, the funds would be channeled to either Harris or Biden, since it was a joint ticket. Then also, all the news is now coming up about pulling up old videos. We see it. I'm sure some people are going back to delete tweets, posts and all that. Because J.D. Vance was said to have said about cat ladies. Did you hear that?
Tell me.
About cat ladies. Okay, so he's talked about the fact that in a 2021 interview on Fox, that America was being ruled or being led by people who didn't have children. and that the two people, Kamala Harris didn't have a child, and don't forget that she's a stepmother to 2 children by her husband. So he speaks to a lot of things. So a number of women are now coming out and saying, we are cat ladies, so we're cat ladies too. That was a very insensitive comment. And then also saying that it might also galvanize young people to come out because it speaks to so many things. So we see it's not good at all for their campaign, not good.
Okay, what is certain, hours after, is the dynamics of the American presidential race has changed by President Biden's endorsement of Kamala Harris. And she went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to have her first rally. Well, that in itself is strategic. Correct. Last week in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that was where President Trump gave his acceptance speech and announced J.D. Vance. And when Kamala Harris went there, look, the RSVPs were so many that they couldn't accommodate them. They had to change venue. 3,000 persons showed up at that rally, and at that rally, there was a lot of enthusiasm. There was a lot of energy. What is clear is that Kamala Harris has energized the Democratic Party. The second thing, of course, is that the donors have been very supportive. They've been coming and giving more money. Within 7 hours, our campaign team was able to raise $52 million. By the end of the day, they made it to $80 million. As of this morning, they made it to $100 million. She has also been endorsed by celebrities in Hollywood, and even more notably by Charlie C. XCX, who has used a label, the slime green label, to say that Kamala Harris is black, which is, IS written in capital letters. And a lot of memes have resulted from that. But I think that the main issue with this campaign is that, 2, it looks like Kamala Harris has seized the momentum. It was, who's that? Sobelo, who wrote a book titled Seize the Moment. She has seized the moment. And that, momentum is already a threat to the Republicans. Even the possible persons who could challenge her, the governor of Michigan, Minnesota, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, they are now being considered as running mates because it will not be wise. Correct. With this momentum, they can't get a leg into it. What is wrong at this moment is the Republicans trying to place the race card, with one of them saying, oh, she's a DIE, she's been chosen because she's a black woman. Well, that is a strategy on the Republican side, if they continue with it, that I think is likely to backfire badly. Will she win? Well, it remains to be seen. She first will have to be, the presumptive nominee and confirmed nominee or a delegate or candidate of our party. Very quickly on Chito, the issue is very clear. As President Biden said, she owned up to what happened. Responsibility. Sure. Which is something we don't do here in Nigeria. If the head of an establishment, the establishment face, you say it's not me now. The person is from, where is that your town? From Odogbolu. I am from Akwa Ibom. So how can you blame an Akwa Ibom person for an Odogbolu person? But we've seen here, there were calls for her resignation. And she said, fine, I'm the best at this moment to lead the security service in the United States. But you want me to go? Okay, I take responsibility and I leave. So public office is not a do or die matter. This is the lesson from that experience.
Thank you very much. Well, let's move on now to our newspaper headlines from across the globe, and we'll begin in Nigeria with the front cover of This Day newspaper. Now, the front cover of This Day looks at support for Dangote swelling, while Mele Kyari denies owning a blending plant in Malta. You remember that Dangote made those comments revealing knowledge of such blending facilities, and so it is interesting to see that Kyari has denied any type of involvement. In addition to that, the House of Representatives have also urged the federal government to suspend the NMD-PRA CEO Farouk Ahmed pending an investigation into the disparaging remarks he made about diesel coming out of the Dangote refinery. And this is ballooned to a bigger issue. You've got the likes of Femi Otedola joining voices of Dr. Akinwumi Adesina and former Central Bank Governor SLS also talking in defense of Aliko Dangote, calling on the federal government to support industrialists like him the same way other countries celebrate their own. I think Femi Otedola in his tweet, he mentioned Mukesh Ambani and how he's supported by the government in India and implored the Nigerian government to do the same. The picture story on the front cover of this day is again Aliko Dangote. This time he's meeting the Gabonese president, Brice Nguema, to explore investment opportunities in cement and fertilizer. And the little headline there reads, demarketed at home but sought after abroad. I do think this is a lesson for everybody in terms of making sure that your own are taken care of at home before they're forced to go outside. Let's move on to the front cover of the Daily Independent. And President Tinubu is pleading with Nigerians that these protests, these planned protests over economic hardship is not necessary. And he made those comments via his Minister for Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris. And essentially he's assuring the public that they should be patient. But as you've rightfully mentioned already on this show, how long are you expecting people to wait? How long does the government want the people to suffer in silence for? And essentially protests don't automatically mean something dangerous. Protest by its very definition is a peaceful thing, and it's also the cornerstone of a healthy democracy. So if you do not want the people to protest their circumstances, you're going to have to change them for the better. Yesterday on What's Trending, Ayo and Rufai, you remember Oji showing us that video from that community leader in Ondo State and how he had grains of rice to feed an entire community of people. It's instances and experiences like that that are going to push people of all ages to the streets if the federal government doesn't do something tangible to address their concerns. If we also look at the picture story on the front page of the Daily Independent, you've got Sim Fubara, the governor of River State, receiving an award for Independent Governor of the Year. Moving on to The Guardian. And The Guardian's looking at the central bank, and their headline reads, weak fiscal support pushes the Central Bank of Nigeria to further rate hikes and a credit squeeze. The CBN, as we all know, has raised its monetary policy rate, which is the benchmark interest rate, by 50 basis points up to 26.75%. The CBN also kept the cash reserve ratio of deposit money banks at 45%, while that for merchant banks was kept at 14%, and then the liquidity ratio was raised to 30%. This is now the fourth time in a row the central bank has raised interest rates since February. Moving on to the Vanguard, and the NASS has passed the 70,000 controversial minimum wage amount into law. It's definitely going to be welcomed by some who have been looking for any type of increase, but as we've been discussing many times, if you put this number into context, it really doesn't do much to address people's purchasing power. If we move on now to the front page of The Punch, the SGF and ministers have held an emergency meeting today as it pertains to nationwide protests and doing all they can to avoid a situation where people are taken to the streets. But I guess they're not doing everything they can, because if they did do everything they can, perhaps people wouldn't want to protest in the first place. Further, the picture headline story on The Punch looks at military in Borno State handing over a rescued Chibok schoolgirl, and 330 people to the authorities in Borno State. And then lastly, for our Nigerian papers, we'll take a look at the Daily Trust. And Tinubu, as we've already mentioned, is asking protesters to shelve these protests and exercise patience. Let's take a look at our African newspapers. The Daily Nation in Kenya, on the topic of protests, the protesters there ignored William Ruto's warning from a few days ago, which was also featured on an earlier edition of the Daily Nation. And they have taken to the streets in several towns across Kenya, which for another day has paralyzed businesses in those areas. But pro-government supporters in areas of Nairobi, the capital, they were able to successfully keep protests there at bay. If we now move on to the Daily Graphic of Ghana, they are looking also at policy reviews. Their mid-year budget review shows the minister unveiling a growth strategy, and that strategy includes the provision of incentives to coveted entities, which in Ghana include state and quasi-state institutions, and then also the introduction of a simplified digital solution for the modified tax scheme and electronic bookkeeping system there in Ghana. Let's take a look at our international papers too. And if we look at the front page of the Eye, an army chief is warning that the UK has 3 years to prepare for war. And the reference to that is a mention of this axis of upheaval between Russia, China, and North Korea and Iran, as they are allegedly working more closely together. And then lastly, if we take a look at The Guardian just in the bottom left-hand corner looks at King Charles's official income and how it's expected to rise more than 50% or by £46 million. And that is because profits of more than £1 billion from the Crown Estate, which a percentage of which goes to fund the monarchy, means that the sovereign grant now, which pays the king, will rise from £86 million in 2023 to 2024 to £132 million in 2025 and 2026, when we all go and be the King of England now. Look at that.
More money for the royalty.
Hey.
And that's why you see developing a disconnect between the royalty and the average people. That's why you have some core Republicans in England. But I mean, it's up to them. I just want to cite something. In Kenya,
Right.
I see Ruto is making a lot of effort, but also he needs to work at reining the young people in. Yes, the young people are very disgruntled, but also he needs to work at reining the young people. And I say that because if you look at the new 11 ministers he brought back, there's still people of questionable character. So you can't keep deceiving the people. When you were talking about the Kamala story, and you were talking about the Catwoman thing, one story came to my mind, and they should be careful, JD Vance should be careful how he abuses Kamala with the fact that she doesn't have a child.
Of
The
her
race
own. She
of
does
our
have,
own.
or
Yeah.
biological
Biological
child. She
child.
does have 2 children.
The race between Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom was in a dead
Do you
heat.
remember that?
I remember that. At the Conservative leadership. In fact, was in a dead heat up till the end. Then Andrea Leadsom granted an interview on a Sunday saying she will do a better job at running the country because she's a mother.
Yeah, she said she had more of a stake in the future, because she had children.
Because she had
That's what David Vance
children.
said.
Yes.
Exactly.
As she said that thing, that word reverberated. I remember
Correct.
that day. Theresa May was going, I think was out on the campaign or something, when they had to call her and they coronated her as Prime Minister that
Right.
day. And the Conservative Party said officially Andrea Leadsom is out of the race, they will never take it. That's why they didn't fight the race to the end of the ballot. It was that statement
That one
Andrea
comment.
Leadsom, that comment she
Right.
made in an interview.
Because
So
I think
let's
even
be
with
careful.
Theresa May, it's one thing to say that she doesn't have any children
Yeah.
after choice, but Theresa May couldn't have any
Couldn't
children.
have any
so
children.
I think it
So
was an
let's
insult that
be careful.
slapped very deep.
It was
yeah.
very deep, very deep.
We don't know why Kamala Harris doesn't have children. It hasn't been stated that it's because she doesn't have the ability to, or the fact that she's chosen to. But either ways, it also raises questions around blended families, because it's
Yeah.
almost saying that because she's not their biological mother, then she has no right to.
That's not good.
And so he's gored so many oxes. Like, so many people are up in arms. In fact, they're saying Taylor Swift, who has often come out to show her 3 cats, is now going to appeal to the younger people. So, and by the way, this was an
She know her
old
stepmother too.
yeah. This was an old interview, by the way,
Right.
because and it's just talking about statements that are made unguarded. He was doing this when he was running for senator in Ohio, and now it's come out, and of course, people are going to capitalize on that. But let me come to Nigeria, and that there was I think it was in the Punch newspaper about the Chibok girl that was rescued. I think we should. I'm glad that the army, the military. Haven't forgotten about these girls, saying that the reason why it was important for them to still go back is understanding the plight of some of these girls who are still held in captivity. And so, great job on that end. And what we've often talked about is, what is the plan for rehabilitation? They did mention the girl's name is Iyi. She's 27 years old now, and she has 2 children. Said she was married to one of her captors, who then absconded and fled to Senegal. But what is the rehabilitation process? Recall that on the anniversary of the Chibok girls' abduction, we had some of them come here,
Yes.
and they talked about some of the stigma they still faced, even in school. Kudos to some people who have trained them in university, but beyond that, it's the psychological support that they still need post them. Do you know what it means to be in captivity for years and then be married to your captor, have children against
and
your
then be
will?
abandoned by them?
I think it's really bad. And then just one thing to mention as well. They were meant to be received by the Borno State Governor, who was represented by the Commissioner of Women's Affairs, who was represented by the Director of Social Welfare. I was like, what could the Commissioner of Women's Affairs be doing that she couldn't go and receive them lady? I think, even though it might seem like a small matter, it shows the seriousness. We must never forget those girls.
Absolutely.
We must treat them very carefully because Nigeria failed them, and we ought to be able to rehabilitate them as well as other people who are still held in captivity.
Okay, I think whether a woman is fertile or not is not the big issue in this election in the United States. The big issue is reproductive rights, which Kamala Harris addressed. Is security, is trade, is the big issues. So whether she has children or not, she's not going to run a maternity ward in the White House. The Oval Office is not a nursery.
Absolutely.
That's not what Americans are focusing upon.
I hope not, but there seems to be a base of people who see a woman in position of power and want to qualify her as a woman by her marital status, by her motherhood. Yeah. So I think that's what he's trying to say.
Well, it's an irrelevant subject.
Absolutely.
As far as the establishment is concerned. But the other story that I wanted to draw attention to is the one that you said the National Assembly has passed the National Minimum Wage Bill into law expeditiously. That was to be expected. But I would like to see the details of that new National Minimum Wage, particularly Section 4. Section 4 of the 2019 Act was saying that if you don't have up to 25 persons in your employment, you are not bound by the National Minimum Wage. The Act was saying if you are a part-time or occasional staff, you are, and if you work in professional places like aviation, maritime, that are governed by international regulations, the new National Minimum Wage may not apply. But in this particular case, during the debate, some of the members were saying even your domestic staff should be governed by a national new minimum national wage. Well, if they are not up to 25, if they are not, so I would like to see what has been passed.
Correct.
Have they removed Section 4 to say now, even if you have two persons working for you, you have to pay them? But the devil is in the details. However, the fact that they passed the bill quickly was expected, and it has happened. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.